Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video. Today we're going to get all into skin tones and we're going to make them all ourselves. Let's get into it.
The strict technomancer that is Vincey V. Let us get to the technique and learn it, Vincey V.
If you're a longtime fan of this channel, you know that I love painting skin. Skin tones are, and just in the wide panoply of colors, are one of the most fun things you can paint. What's really awesome, though, about skin tones is that you don't actually need any bottle that says skin tone on it of any type. You can make them all yourselves. So today, I'm going to take you through how to mix every skin tone you're ever going to need to mix. And we're going to do it all with 4 simple paints. So let's head over to the desk and let's get mixing. All right. As I said, we're going to mix this all with just 4 simple paints. Now, what are those paints, you ask? Well, there are these 4 right here. Basically, a red, a yellow, a blue, and some kind of white, or near white. In this case, I've chosen a couple different of my favorite colors, but again, the particular brands here really don't matter. Just pick something that's mostly a true red, mostly a true yellow, mostly a true blue, and something near white, and you're in the ballpark. You can use any brand, it doesn't matter. So I go ahead and load up those onto my palette. Now, as a point of fact, if you're going to be mixing skin tones, you probably want, like for a whole model or for many models, you're going to want a little bit more than I put on the palette here, but I'm just mixing them so you can see. So, let's start mixing. Once I've got the 4 in place, we're going to go and start creating our skin tones. Let's start with a basic Caucasian skin tone. Very simple flesh tone. So, that simple Caucasian flesh tone, what are we going to do? We're going to take some red and yellow. Now, we're not mixing them in equal parts, and this is really important. We're trying to get to a good orange. Now, the red is super powerful, and the yellow, not so much. So we take just a little bit of red, we mix it with a lot of a lot of yellow, and we get a nice, bright orange. Once we've got that, we have the basis for all skin tones. Everything can effectively come from here. But you're probably like, well, I'm not orange. I don't know anybody who's orange. And you're probably right. People aren't actually orange in real life. Don't worry, we're going to get there. So, we take that orange and we begin by just mixing in some ivory. And as we mix the ivory into the orange, what we effectively get is a base sunny skin tone or warm skin tone. That's really as simple as it is. So we mix that up, and there we've got a nice base sunny skin tone. Basically the thing that comes in the bottle that says sunny or warm skin tone or mid skin tone or Caucasian flesh or I don't know. Any of those bottles that are labeled like that are probably something like this. Now, of course, there's only one model we could use to show this stuff off, and that is our good friend Larry the Ogre. He's got a lot of skin and he's ready to be a good demonstration for this. So, let's just go ahead and lay some of that skin I've mixed down and you can see how it works. And what I can do is just mix in additional ivory to get lighter highlight elements. I can bring in additional orange tones, push it down the spectrum some to get some of the shadows. And that's a pretty simple spread right there. Nothing too complicated, not at all. But of course, if I want, I can then take the red that's there, thin it to a glaze, or mix a small amount in, and I can get a nice simple shadow or red tone in the lower parts of that skin. So where there are folds, where there would be natural red tones expressed, we can do that either by mixing it in or through a glaze. And that's what's magical about this process. It shows you that the way you mix the paints, the order you operate actually matters here. So we use the red first. Red plus yellow to make orange plus white to make skin. Then we go back and we glaze the red on top of that, and we're creating these stacks of process that really create something interesting and cool. So you can see here how basically with mixing that in, when I bring in the reds either to create a more pinky skin tone, which I can do just by simply taking the skin tone that I mixed with orange, mix in a tiny amount of red or white, and bang, now I've got a more pink skin tone. So if you're working on, you want a more female figure who's has a little more red and pink tones in her flesh, or Skaven or something like that, or a natural creature where you want more pinky tones in there. Great, there you go. Little bit of red into that orange-white mix. You've got your pink skin tone ready to go. Glaze it on top. You create those nice, subtle, soft transitions in the skin, and you're all set. Okay, next up we're going to mix something a little more unusual. Here I'm going to mix a more cold, sort of jaundiced skin tone. Something maybe if you're more out for people who are more, maybe it's frostbitten or they're sick or something like that. So instead we start with the same orange, yet again, that's mixed up already. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a little bit of the white to sort of bring that out, but then I bring in a little bit of blue. Just a little bit of that soft blue added like I would the red will cool it out. Suddenly you can get very cold flesh if you mix it up very bright, very pale. So if I take maybe that pinky one from before, bring a little bit of blue in, I'll get a very like cold frostbitten skin. If I allow the yellow to win, I'll get something that's more green, more sickly. And in fact, that's what we're going to play with here. So you can really get a lot of those spectrums just by pushing and pulling very slightly, adding little bits of yellow or little bits of blue. Let's look at how our jaundiced color looks on Larry. Here you can see how that compares to the normal skin tone, much more yellow. Now, of course, I can bring in more white for the highlight to, again, bring that up some. I can bring in more blues to get more deep, dark shadows. This is great if you want somebody who looks sick or dead or dying, unhealthy. And as I said, if you start from the pink side, if you mix up to the pink we did in the previous step, and then you add the blues, instead what you get is frostbitten, cold, sort of like somebody walking across an icy tundra type flesh. But here, I mix that in. Now again, I can still bring in the reds, yet again as I do here as a glaze, to just add some more life to that. So if you don't want the person to seem completely dead or like a Simpsons character, you can bring that in so they still seem somewhat alive. Okay. That one out of the way, let's go back to the palette. Now it's time to start mixing some darker skin tones. So let's start with really dark skin. So this is like generally like African or really black deep skin tone. So we begin by mixing red and blue. And what we get there is actually generally a nice, very deep brown color. Now this is usually a little bit darker than what we would expect skin tone to be, but not always. The human race is a wide rainbow of colors. And so if you're looking for something really dark, this is a perfectly fine sort of starting place, but you won't really have much to go into shadow. Now the simplest thing to do here is just bring in some of the ivory. That will give you a nice spread of tone up through a highlight color, and it'll feel like a very purple infused brown tone. Again, if you're looking for that like very dark African skin tone, that's going to be your way to go. You can see here, let's go ahead and put it on Larry, work it back and forth, and basically all I'm doing, this is the simplest way you can work with this spectrum, okay, is just bringing in a little bit of the ivory for the highlights. We bring back in the red-blue mix for the shadows, and so on and so forth. Now, yet again, you can mix in other tones. You can bring in reds and stuff like that to add more life to the skin, all of that. It's a pretty straightforward process if you're looking for that deep black, like darkest skin tone. Okay, but we can actually go and mix what I would think of as a more traditional African skin tone as well by adding more warmth into it. So this one's a little more complicated in the mix, a little bit, but not much. You start with that red-blue, okay? No problem. So we get that nice brown tone again. And then what we're going to do is bring in some of that previous orange, and we mix some of that in, and then go up through the white through there. When we do that, we add, because we're bringing in both the red and the yellow through the orange, what we bring in through that orange tone is a lot of warmth. And so I mix this around, playing with different mixes. You can bring in a little more heavy red or a little more heavy yellow. There's lots of ways you can play with this spectrum. Ultimately, let's move over to Larry. And here you can see this looks much more like a traditional sort of African skin tone, a black skin tone. And again, you can bring in a little bit of the ivory or a little bit of yellow and the ivory mixed for a highlight to bring that in, or use one of the other Caucasian skin tone mixes as a highlight. Your normal red plus yellow plus white, so orange plus white mix, will actually work as a perfectly good highlight to this. Whereas you can then softly glaze with that red-blue mix to add your deepest shadows. Yet again, you can bring in more glazes. You can use the red, you can use the orange, you can use the blues. All of those things can be great glazes on here to add shadows, life, warmth, all of that stuff. And you can see how what we come to here with Larry is a pretty nice looking sort of African skin tone. Great. All right. We're knocking through them, okay? So now we can see we've gone from very light pale skin tones to very dark skin tones. So now let's do something a little more olive, a little more in the middle, maybe more Asian. There's lots of different sort of, skin tones we could mix in the middle there, okay? So for this one, yet again, I'll go ahead and mix up some of that red-blue skin tone, right? That's fine. We're good there. Then what I'm going to do is mix some of the sort of more Caucasian skin tone, right? So the orange plus white mix. Okay. What I then do is bring in a little bit more yellow, and then just, you see me bring it all together. Okay? And as I sweep all of this together, what I get is this really nice mix that's a higher value, has a little bit more warm tones in it, that kind of thing. And that gives us a more olive infused skin. So maybe like Mediterranean or Asian skin tone or anything like that. You can, again, depending on exactly how much ivory you include in here, you can get to basically any of those sorts of places. Now let's go ahead and put it on Larry. And here you can see, again, slap it down. One of the things that happens here is I'm working really quick in wet over wet paint, so I will sometimes move some of the, lift up some of the paint that I put on. Don't worry about it, it's fine. Don't work this quick and mess up your wet paint. But you can see how then, again, I just bring in more ivory for the highlight, go back to the darkest tone that I originally mixed for the shadow. And once again, we can bring in the reds for glazes. We can bring in all of those things to add more life, more warmth, or more cold, depending on what we need. Okay, so now we've kind of mixed, very pale, very middle in lots of different ways, from medium dark all the way down to very dark skin tones. We've covered the whole sort of panoply of the human race, as it were there, okay? But I want to see it all in action. Let's put it all together. Let's do Larry's face. And when I do this, you're going to see me work across a lot of the different skin tones. So I'm just going to shut up for a minute and I'm going to let this play. Here you go. Here's Larry's face. There you go. That's how it all worked. Pretty straightforward, really, when it comes down to it. You can see how you can mix all of these different tones. And the more orange you make the base, and then you add it in, the more sort of, the more bright orange you start from, the more you'll end up with more of a sunny skin tone, okay? The more pinky you make it by bringing in the reds, like the more sort of soft, often kind of feminine as it's portrayed skin tone, though that's not really not true. Obviously, women, just like men, have all the skin tones in the world. It's just most figures, most of the time when we paint female figures, we tend to infuse more pink in things like the cheeks and stuff like that. Okay? So, lots of options there. What I would encourage you more than anything to do is experiment. I gave you all the basic recipes here you need to mix any skin tone you want. But as I said, you can play with just bringing in incrementally small amounts of these colors actually into the mix or into the whole piece as a glaze. And that can very subtly shift the way that you perceive the figure overall. It can add more life, more warmth, more cold, change the environment they're in, all of those sorts of things. So I would highly encourage you to experiment, to play around with this on your own. It's just a lot of fun, honestly. Once you've kind of unlocked this recipe, that once you start from the orange plus the white and the red-blue to make the base brown, you really can go kind of anywhere you need, because you can bring that orange plus the dark one together to get a more umber color. You can bring these together to make even more alien skin colors, right? So if you want something non-human, these same tricks with like blues and purples and greens, your orcs, all of those things, you can use these same tricks that you see here through the mixing, the application, and the glazing to bring more life into all of your figures. Okay, so I do hope you enjoyed this little journey through skin tones. Come back next week, and I'm going to actually be doing a deeper dive on dark skin tones. So if you're interested in darker skin tones on your miniatures, more African type skin tones, come back next week. We're going to be painting a really cool figure, and we're going to be doing a lot of that. But hey, if you liked this, give it a like. Subscribe for additional hobby cheating. We have new videos here every Saturday. If you've got any questions about mixing these skin tones that I didn't cover, drop those down in the comments below. I always answer every question asked. If you want to support the channel, help me keep making videos like this, I would really appreciate that. And there's lots of ways you can do it. You can hit like and subscribe, that's free. But down in the comments, there are things like my affiliate links. Don't cost you anything extra, often save you money, and are a great way to support the channel. There's also the games down there that Uncle Adam and I make if you're looking for some new ways to use your figures. And of course, there's our Patreon, focused on review and feedback and taking your next step on your hobby journey. As always, though, I thank you so much for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.